So this is the part where I swap hats. So the next session is all about how to deliver authentic storytelling. And we touched upon it just before there in the last session with Primark. And I am joined by an incredible panel. And I'll come to you all in a second. But we're all going to share one specific example. We have 30 minutes to do that. And some of us have been behind the camera, in front of it, are strategists, work with so many people in the industry. So we're all going to share, some of that experience. So Tom, if I could start with you, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a documentary producer, and I work on a long-running series that kind of profiles young disabled people and their kind of real-life stories. So yeah, that's my background.
What's it called?
It's called Born Different.
Cool, thank you. Ali?
Hi, nice to see you again, Shani. My name is Ali Hanan. I'm the chief exec and founder of a company called, organisation called Creative Equals. We deliver what we call the new ROI, and we call that the return on inclusion, which really matters to our people and to brands, and to all our cultures. And we focus on delivering a consciously inclusive strategy for brands, building capabilities, building communities, and building great cultures. That's a little bit about us. Yeah.
Thank you. And Brooke?
Hello, I'm Brooke. I am the founder of the Disabled and Proud podcast, and I also consult with Not For, who are a production, creative, everything company, but everything is all based on disability. So my entire life is literally pickled in disability, and I say pickled because once a cucumber is a pickle, it can't be a cucumber again. And once you're in disability, you can't not see disability again. So there we are.
I love that. And I love the brand name Not For, because that's exactly how it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Dan?
Yep, my name is Dan Salazar. I am a motion graphics designer at Informa Connect.
Thank you. And we're going to hear more about your expertise in a second. But let's kick off with mine, because you haven't heard enough from me already today. So as well as running my own consultancy and working with businesses and brands on all things disability, inclusion and accessibility, I am also someone who you may have seen in front of the camera as a broadcaster. And back in 2019, I think, I received a message on LinkedIn from a brand agency who said, "Did you find your current job," which at the time was working with Virgin Media, on LinkedIn? And I said, "Yeah, actually I did." And then I went and they asked a few more questions. And at first I was like, "Who is this person? Why are you asking me all this?" And it was for a huge campaign with LinkedIn. So we hopefully have the video now. So if we can watch that, and then we can talk a bit about that after.
It can sometimes feel like the world of work isn't designed for people like me.
After years of campaigning for equality, I was desperate to turn my passion into a career. I was searching for jobs on LinkedIn and found a role as a disability program manager. I hit apply, got the interview, and here I am. LinkedIn helped me find a job that gives me a seat at the table so I can speak up for others like me. I'm Shani, and I found a job that breaks down barriers.
And that was the result of that thing landing in my DM. Thank you. And I think this is the first time I'd done anything as big as that before. And when the agency that Brands to Life sort of said, this is going to be really big. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realise my face would be on the side of buses. I would be on the tube turnstiles, that it would be on billboards and on TV. And it was a huge moment for me and my career. And I do genuinely love LinkedIn. And if you're not following me, you're definitely missing out. But I want to talk about my experience as being the talent, because everything that you saw in that 30-second clip was authentic to me. The script, it was short. I had to say all of that in 30 seconds, and that isn't being sped up. That is me speaking. But even, getting the stepladder to make a cup of tea, that's my reality. Everything in the script, they didn't write it for me. They said, we want it to reflect you and your lived experience. And when I had done stuff previously, I was encouraged to sensationalize things, or, if you cry at this bit, it will be better. You'll pull on the heartstrings of people. So I felt as the talent that I had a really, positive experience, and, the campaigns won loads of awards as well. And I think it just showed people what authentic storytelling can look like. But the feedback that I got from people was obviously, it's amazing, but they hadn't really seen disabled people of colour on screen either, and especially in an advert as well. And, I'm nearly 40 years old and I still don't see enough disabled people of colour on screen. And so I think I'm going to just sum up my bit by saying we're all here today to talk about accessibility and inclusion. But if we're not doing it through the lens of intersectionality, we kind of may as well not bother. And I know that's harsh, and I know that's a bit of a big statement, but I genuinely believe it, because when we don't work from an intersectional perspective, we're only serving the most privileged people within that group, and we're leaving everybody else behind, even further behind. So that was me and my experience. But Tom, let's come to you. What have you come to share today?
Yeah, so I think as a producer, I'm very interested in the kind of process of what it takes to tell a story and what it takes to tell it in the right way. And I think process basically all comes down to people and the people that are kind of working on a project. And so the successes I've seen have always been when that kind of holistic view of a project is taken and kind of each stage is planned out with disabled people behind camera and in front of camera. I think you were speaking about it right at the end of the last session. And obviously I'm behind camera, I lead my team, and we make a lot of effort to try and get more people involved. And it's hard work, right? It's hard work to find disabled people in this industry, because typically we've been, not given access and not given opportunities. But when you're able to bring people in at every stage, whether that's, the kind of early brainstorms to the shoot days, to the edit, to the distribution, I think what you see is better results, because ultimately, okay, I'll give you one example. I'm not much of a caster myself. I'm not much of a casting producer. But when I was brought onto this project, there was a real issue with disabled people not understanding why they were being called up and why they were being talked to about the project. And I think when you're a disabled person talking to another disabled person, barriers, walls, they just fall. And so I think as a business and kind of as production companies or whoever you are, having those people to be able to break down those walls for you really kind of helps open up a whole world of opportunity.
It's like a shortcut to building that trust, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That trust is inherently a little bit already there when you're speaking to a fellow disabled person, or at least someone who will have an insight without having to explain. And
and maybe someone that they, like you say, trust to tell the story in the right way. Everything's about tone with disability, right? You have to get the tone right. As we saw in that film, it wasn't patronizing. It wasn't, you were just being seen as someone successful, going about their job. And, that's what that piece was about. And I think it's very easy to tell a disabled story really badly.
Yeah.
But if you have disabled people involved at every stage of the process, it's a lot easier to get it right.
Absolutely agree. And Ali, I know you are a big believer in this and work with your clients to do this. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So we have a phrase that is, who makes the work shapes the work. And a little bit about my background is when I first started my career back in 2000, I'm really old, just 3% of the UK's creative directors were female. And so that was one of the first junctures that I set up Creative Equals. By 2014, it had only gone up to 12%. And one of the big inflections was actually that women, as they're stepping up to leadership roles, go off on all sorts of career breaks. So we set up our first program for returners with Diageo to get women back to work. On our first program, actually, one of the people that applied was a woman who was deaf. And she'd been out of work for 3 years, I think, to your point, Tom, because actually getting into the industry was so difficult for her. No one would even give her an interview. And she was an extremely, extremely talented UX designer. And of course we were like, oh, well, what do you need? And she was like, I just need this piece of tech. And it took a couple of, which was basically taking voice to text translation for the program. By the way, it's a 3-week program with D&AD. There's a whole mentoring program around it. And the aim off the back of it is to get people jobs. And Dan's going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And it took another couple of years after the pandemic to set up our first disabled creatives program. But we're going to be running one in New York next year, and hopefully one also again in the UK. So it's a great way to find disabled talent, to really make sure we have, all that kind of representation at the table. And I think just a quick other story is we have been working with Reckitt for a number of years, and they and actually we don't have the video, which is a shame, but how they think about it, and it's not just about obviously representing at the table or even thinking about it at the casting phase, but it's really working backwards into the heart of brands. So how they think about integrating that into the heart of their brand storytelling is they'll take a sustainable development goal like SDG Goal 5, gender equality. Then they'll take a brand like Vanish. Vanish, it's a stain remover, but at the end of the day, it also helps clothes live longer, and it's part of their sustainability strategy because you don't have to go and buy more clothes. You can just help them, last longer. And then they will look for a group within that story that is most disproportionately impacted. And what they found is young girls, particularly young teenage women, don't get diagnosed with autism. So they struggle through the school system. They often drop out. And so they came up with a piece of work called Me, My Autism and I. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's a really incredible piece of work. It just absolutely smashed it at all the award shows this year. But actually on that set, to your point too, Tom, is, she actually couldn't cope with going onto set to go on, to do the whole production on a set. So they actually ended up recreating her whole entire house, employing all her family, all her friends to actually make the story as authentic as it could be. So they actually, rather than putting it onto a set, they actually recreated, her entire bedroom, brought all the linen, all the clothes, everything to actually make her feel comfortable in it. So she's a street actor in that piece of work. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for that insight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brooke, what would you like to share?
So I work with Not For as well as doing my own thing. And this year with Not For and Guinness and Six Nations, we had a task to make sure that Six Nations, the home games, were as accessible as possible for everybody with a disability. And that is visible, not visible, neurodivergent, the entire scope of what we're all here today to talk about. And we worked pretty much from the ground up. And that meant that we had to have multiple research groups with disabled people, all different types of disabled people. And really, to your point, the intersectionality there was here, there and everywhere, because it had to be across the board. Because when we think about sporting events, the general population that go to sporting events is so diverse that we had to somewhat emulate that in our research group. So it couldn't be, 90% white, because that's not what happens at like a football stadium. It's not 90% white. It has to be representative. And so we had a lot of research groups, and Guinness was so open to everything that we came across. I mean, when they first presented us with the project, the name, so someone clearly in the room wasn't disabled when they presented the name to us, because as soon as we portrayed it to the community, everyone was like, out, like we need to change this. And we said to them, like, your idea is fantastic and we love it, but actually the name, we need to work on this because it's not sitting right with the people that you're trying to serve. And that's what this all comes down to, is if we're trying to get communities involved, we need to listen to them at base level immediately, as soon as you're opening the doors, as soon as you're starting to think about a project, because you might have a project that is unbelievably phenomenal in your brain. And then when you bring it to the community, they're like, what? Like, sometimes, we do miss translations, and that is the same for absolutely everybody. It's not just the disabled community. So being able to really think about where we're putting research, when are we starting research, making sure we're starting from the beginning with a really representative group of disabled people, all intersectionalities represented, that is where you're going to get the best results, the best work, the best inclusion. And actually it's just best practice. And so we really need to be thinking about research groups and using the disabled population way sooner, because sometimes it can go too far. And actually, you know, we're also talking about money here today, aren't we? And like, it's really ugly to say that, but we are. And if you go so far into a project and you get told, actually, this is not how it's not going very well, you've also lost out on a lot of cash when you could have actually saved yourself some cash if you just started at the beginning with the research group, with the community, getting them involved and starting from baseline.
I love that. And I completely agree with all of it. And some feedback I get sometimes is, well, where do we find these disabled people? So have you got anything to say to that?
Reach out to us at With Not For. We can find those people. That's what we do. And also, generally, just put like something on social media that you want to help get involved with disabled people, like forms, research, filling in groups, table talks, everything. People want to get involved and to be able to share their experiences and their lived stories. Think about social media. It's amazing. It's the devil and it's also brilliant as well. But use it when we're thinking about disabled people, because disabled people need and use technology a lot more so than the general population, because a lot of technology is assistive and it's incredible. But just think about using social media. Think about email shots, even like chatting to someone in your workplace. They might know someone who might know someone, you know. Disabled conversations are a bit awkward to have, but like as soon as you have them, you're actually opening the doors for something really beautiful to happen. So if you're in need for disabled people, come give us a shout. Come find me. I'm about.
Absolutely. And so many other people, organisations and charities offer services like that and can really help you find the people that you need. But there's a theme that's coming up just before I come to you, Dan, is about this theme of employment, because you know, we're saying work with disabled people, and to your example, Ali, of the deaf lady who couldn't get work for 3 years, disabled people are twice as likely to be unemployed, and we have to apply for 60% more jobs. And then if we are in work, we may face a disability pay gap, a pay gap that's so wide that effectively from the 7th of November this year, disabled people work for free, because the gap is equivalent to working 2 months of the year for free. And so what I'm not saying is two people in the same role, one's getting paid more, one's getting paid less. The gap is so big because we don't have enough disabled people in the workforce. We don't have enough disabled people in leadership positions. And it's hard for disabled people to not only get in work, but also stay in work as well. And to your point, wherever you can create opportunities to involve disabled people, make sure that you're paying them as well.
Yeah. Do.
This is our expertise. This is our lived experience. And sometimes it can be traumatic as well. You know, there's a lot of things that I do. Let's say if I'm recounting a bit of my experience, it can be a bit re-traumatizing. I've probably told it like 1,000 times now, so I'm probably a bit more desensitized to it. But, you know, it's a job, and it's important that we're paid.
Well, when you think you wouldn't hire an electrician and then be like, no, I'm not going to pay you.
Yeah.
Like, they have expertise that you don't have, or a plumber or anything else. They all have expertise that you don't have. So if you're looking for expertise in the disabled area and the community and what we can and can't do, especially with disabled creatives, make sure that you're putting your money where your mouth is and pay people.
So Dan, I would love to hear from you. Firstly, about your experience on the Creative Equals program and your example as well that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so before I was accepted into the program, I was in a position in an employer that I'd been with for a while. And when we're talking about employability and talking about employment, like having disabled people there in the room and actually listening to them makes such a difference, because I was in my position where I felt like my voice wasn't really listened to. I wasn't utilized to my best skill set. And over a period of time, that really started to erode my confidence, where I needed to kind of change things up and I needed to do something about it. So as everyone knows, LinkedIn, as you mentioned, looking for opportunities. I found the opportunity last year to apply for disabled creatives. And I was like, okay, let me give this a go, see what happens with this. I was thankfully accepted, and it's just been so transformational from the beginning till now, because not only have I found a community of disabled creatives, also wanting to be in the creative industries and understand my perspective, but I also saw the disabled creative leaders that were giving us the talks during the program that just showed me that there is the space. I can get to here. And I think that combined just gave me that fire that I kind of lost within the previous employment. And now I kind of see myself in a really positive workplace where all sides of me are really embraced, and that I now actually have the support of my team, but also my community. So it feels less like I'm alone when I'm facing any issues.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad that it worked out well for you and you did the course, and it sounds like it was really transformative.
100% it was.
And without sort of going into anyone's personal details, but you know, your fellow cohort, have they gone on to find inclusive employers in the industry as well?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like a lot of people have made the right choices now, and kind of we've all kind of had that lease of confidence to really find the next step. And there's always just been such great support from the Creative Equals team. So can't sing them any more praises.
Oh, thank you. And I think what's really important that you highlighted in your story is that you were in a workplace and you are a diverse individual, but that wasn't being appreciated. So it's no good having and attracting diverse talent if they don't feel that they can contribute, or their contribution is not being valued, or they don't feel psychologically safe. Because diversity, it's a measurement really, and it's a fact. It helps us to understand the types of people that we have in our workplace, but inclusion really is an action. And we need to feel empowered to do that. And I think it's probably important to talk about something called internalized ableism. Oh, I had a sharp intake there. Are people familiar with this in the room? I'm sure some of you are. Yeah, if you're not, so ableism is the term to describe the discrimination and social prejudice of disabled people, but there's also a form of that exists within us as disabled people, because imagine living in a society where the dominant narrative is disabled people are either benefit cheats or we all want to be Paralympians, and government calls us work shy, and it's really hard to get a job, and we live in a world that isn't designed for us. You can't help but internalize all of that that negative narrative, that stereotyping. And so we as disabled people hold ourselves to unobtainable standards, and we essentially discriminate against ourselves. So what I'm trying to say is, in addition to not being empowered, we may also be battling with that too. And I don't think I've ever met a disabled person that has ever said, no, I don't have that. I still have loads of it too. But we've got about 3 minutes left. If anybody wants to share anything more.
To jump on your point about internalized ableism, so Unlearning Ableism did a massive study for all of disabled people in the UK. And the findings of that were that 99% of disabled people all experience internalized ableism.
Wow.
So when you think about a pie chart, and if you're a company and you're trying to fix some problems, and you think about how big 99% is versus the 1% that don't, you would try and fix the 99%, right? Because that's maths and that's how it all works. So when, going back to that internalized ableism, every single disabled person you have met at some point has experienced that and has faced that. And that is terrifying. And so how can we make it better for that experience? How, as companies, can we think about employing disabled talent in looking at disabled creatives? How can we help that experience? Because we are 10 times harsher on ourselves than what our boss is. And that's not a nice place to be, but this is something that every single disabled person is working through. And it's a stat to have at the back of your mind that 99% feel this and 1%, which is very, very small. And actually the likenesses, it's probably 0.5%. experience this.
And I think that actually brings us back nicely to the topic that we're talking about, is how to deliver authentic storytelling. The role of marketeers and advertisers. You have the privilege to shape society and the way society thinks about groups and about people, and it should be seen as the most important responsibility as a marketeer or advertiser, in my opinion, or as a brand, because, you know, with all the will in the world, the government isn't going to change everything that we need as disabled people, but brands can, and brands can influence and have a level of influence that governments will never have. So I'm going to finish on that note, but thank you all so much for sharing your contributions. And we're mostly all around today and for lunch. So please do come and get the expertise from this amazing panel. Thank you all. Thank you.